To be honest, I have not sure that Neville thought this out well when he and his posse asked just some hillbilly from Missouri to come here and talk about data acquisition. That might have been a mistake on his part. We'll see where that goes. So the long and the short of what we're going to visit about here is more of a 30,000-foot view of how we acquire data for any of these purposes. Obviously, we'll delve into this topic just a little bit, but to be frank, you all are the experts on this particular topic. I don't pretend to be. And so we're just going to talk a little bit more from a perspective from somebody who's delved in this and lives in the state of Missouri. If you don't know, for those of you who are visiting, some of these issues are tense in this particular state. Would that be accurate, Brad? But also you should know the densest cow-calf population in the Union is in Missouri. 25 cows to the square mile. So we have some unique things to think about. And if I were to go 100 miles anywhere towards my east and draw a swath, and if I tell some of those folks I'm going to be in this space today, frankly, I'll tell you what my brother-in-law told me. What the hell are you thinking? Okay? Now, differently, if I maybe go to my west just a few feet, that might change a little bit. So, a good portion of us in here are parents. And I don't know about you, but I recall my kids are a little bit older now. And whether they were 5 or 15, when they would come home from school, I would ask, well, talk to me. What did we do today? Now you should know, it's a little bitty rural school in the middle of nowhere, and my wife was oftentimes their teacher or principal, depends upon the year. And so when they said, nothing, actually that was a win. That was a win. But at the same time, isn't it amazing how when our kids told us that, if Grandpa came over, or Grandma, or the neighbor, with ice cream, or they're touching an animal, all of a sudden, man, they're just spewing stuff. Jenny stole my doll. Billy took my lunch. Oh, I took his lunch first. Forgot, Grandpa. Right? They become an open book. Or we might have some friends, whether at church or at school or at work, and we know somebody needs a little guidance, a little bit of wisdom, and we reach out to offer that wisdom, and we talk too much and we don't listen to each other. So instead of actually helping take those steps, sometimes those friends who you could benefit, they'll use more subtle ways to broadcast their concerns, things that are not seen by many folks. By the way, I heard a report this morning, 26% of adults have deleted this app from their phone. Thank you to the Almighty. Okay? The only thing I would encourage everybody in this room is go ahead and finish that, and let's just all jump on that. So what this tells me is we will share information, do it all the time, but we're going to do it on our terms. And that is directly touches on what you all have been discussing all morning, right? This song and dance, this back and forth, this push and pull. This is who we are. And Joe was talking a little bit earlier when we were eating breakfast. And I took the time a while back to listen to a lot of the videos from back in the April meeting. You should do that. A lot of tremendous things in there that you can sift through with time. And Joe mentioned that back in one of those meetings. And he mentioned something similar here this morning. The thing we love about cattlemen and cattlewomen is they're an obstinate lot. And it makes this job pretty difficult. It's bred into us. So, to be honest, the real title of this talk is something a little bit different. You all are the experts. I am in no way in a position to come here and win an argument on traceability concerns. But since they gave me the microphone, I am in a position to start one. Or, maybe more appropriately, start a renewed conversation over some of the things we just heard. We've heard some phenomenal things this morning that frankly uplift this cattleman quite a little bit. So, this is my question. This is the challenge I think we have to ask ourselves when we go down this road. Data acquisition at any level, especially when it comes to things that are as sensitive as the topics you all are covering this morning. Is it an accountability play? Or do we really want to put people in a position to do better? And we all have to ask ourselves that sometimes, because I know there are times I convince myself I'm trying to do right by somebody, but what I'm really trying to do is to squeeze them in a box that I want them in because it benefits me. You all are probably immune to that. You're better humans than I. But maybe you've had that weakness a time or two. Let's remind ourselves this term. I guess I would challenge you all if we could go back in time a couple decades and choose a different word. I think it might have behooved us. Because if you're a simple cattleman somewhere, trace. If you can't read that, frankly, I don't have my glasses on, so I can barely read it. Discover by investigation. Ability, the means to do something. So what does a cattleman or a cattlewoman hear? Traceability is the means to investigate. Find me, know me, supervise me. That's what they hear. You may not mean that. In fact, I've heard a lot of folks who very clearly don't necessarily mean that. But that's what they hear. And we need to be sympathetic to that. Maybe even more so, let's be empathetic to that. Let's just say you get home tomorrow, hectic day, Thursday, catching up, Friday evening, you, your spouse, maybe your kids come over if they're out of the house, and you get 30 minutes to sit on the porch. It's a nice evening Friday. All's good. There's your setting. It's about 4:45. A white car with a U.S. government plate pulls up to your house, and on the side of that 2013 Chevrolet Impala says Internal Revenue Service. How transparent are you all of a sudden? Be honest. You immediately pucker the hell up. And that's okay. That's where they find themselves in some of these situations. So I've been extraordinarily impressed to hear from start to finish how many folks in this room recognize that and appreciate that. Tremendous. This is a little cowboy math. Now I'm going to concede to you this cowboy math very well may be flawed, but it doesn't matter if it is the calculus by which they operate. They meaning me, maybe you, okay? And so this would be a little higher than average, of course. We've heard some average numbers, but let's just say, for the sake of a conversation starter, you're somebody who has 35 calves to sell. 600 pounds, so you got 21,000 pounds of product to pay for this year's endeavors. Clearly you have another job in town, I'm guessing. If not, you live on a cheaper income than we do. Let's take an extreme circumstance, shall we? A year that we all are very familiar with. The tail end of 2003 changed a lot of these conversations pretty fast. And in their moments, 15% of feeder calf value just so happens the calves were about $1, so 15% comes about $15. That's really easy math for me. So, they lost about $15. That's kind of where that happened, right there in the middle of that screen. But also note, if you're that same producer and you're like, okay, that's fine, that sucks, but I don't ship any calves for another year, and you look at the tail end of the next year, it all fixed itself. That's what they told themselves. And actually, just mere months later, price was back where it was better than what it was in late 2003. So the pain was real, but it was short. And so, let's just say hypothetically in that particular year, this producer sold those calves. Lost nearly $3,200 if they marketed calves in that window of time. Now, let's just say the typical guy goes, or gal, says, okay, I've got $2 some odd in this thing. I got it shipped to me. I got a little time. I got to put the tags in these calves. And so if I have 35 calves, roughly $5 a calf, by the time I put some aggravation and work into it, I'm pushing $200 into this effort on an annual basis for something that apparently only happens quite rarely. Again, I'm telling you, this might be flawed math, but it's math we have to consider. So this producer can say clearly, well, I'm going to spend a little bit of money, but this effort can make me back $140 a year. That's if this traceability effort actually saves me and it doesn't find me and I'm the culprit. Right? If you've been to my place, you might know I might be the culprit. Okay? $140. Now you can multiply 35 calves by 10. You can then multiply 140 by 10. Or you can divide it by 10, 3.5 calves, do whatever you want. What that tells this fella or this gal is that for an additional $140 a year, I am giving you the means to investigate. Again, I'm not suggesting this isn't a flawed bit of calculus, but it's the calculus you all have considered clearly time and time again. So many times, when it's left to their own devices, they're going to say no. Have we done anything significantly mandatory nationwide? Obviously, we have individual states who have done different. Not really. But did anything come of that particular time? I would argue yes. I'd actually have a proof that capitalism, when tried, typically succeeds, is successful. For example, an entity that's been recognized once or twice already. In that same era of time and directly thereafter, that's when the firm that you and I think of, IMI Global, that's when things got real. Because what did they do? They realized if we can add value to animals by adding awareness, these folks can keep selling. Capitalism works when it's tried. It was a voluntary effort, worked very effectively, and I think they would suggest it's been effective to this day. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that. So, you all talk about the tech stuff, and that's great. And here, that's your conversation. That's for you all to decide. The masses outside of this room, they neither know nor care. They expect you all to tend to that, so I'm not nearly competent enough to have that conversation, so I'm not going to try. I'd say the bigger issue is the thing you all have been bantering about most of the morning, and that's philosophy. And that is, do you feel in your gut that that young person today that is hungry, that doesn't have a good meal, is better served if part of their meal is animal protein? If you don't really feel that in your gut, why are you here? And if you don't believe that producer, that family that's scrapping to make a living to provide that product for them, or for you and I when we go out and have our nice steak this evening, again, why are you here? Does this room want ADT to happen? Clearly it does. But more importantly, I think we all want producers to want this to happen. Do they see that value? And you all have talked about it over and over. The value add. That's where my experience with data capture comes in. How do we make, encourage, incentivize folks to care about data? That's my primary contention. Is that despite the polls, I work with some of the most serious seed stock producers in the country on a daily basis. Folks who have hundreds and thousands of serious cattle, who believe in science at the highest level. And this scares the snot out of them. And I work with some of the savviest commercial producers who some run 30 cows, some run 7, 8, 10,000 cows. And even if they know this is necessary, it still is a struggle. What they want is for this to matter for them. If they're going to go down this road, let's make it matter. And so, to be clear, I guess I would challenge a couple things that I've heard a little bit about the need to hand a producer money. I could go back to that picture with George Washington if you want. I don't know a cattleman or a cattlewoman that I'm aware of who wants somebody coming up to him and going, Miss Good, would you please take some government money? They don't want that crap. Let's just be honest. They want to earn this. But what they would like is just a little leverage. Because let's just be simple and straight. What we're all doing here is having a conversation about how to acquire knowledge from them. And for the most part, yes, we can talk in an amorphous sense about how some individual producer in Bates County, Missouri, 100 miles down the road is going to say, well, this is going to save the industry if I don't have a disease outbreak at my place. Sorry, guys. That might be true. They're not going to think like that. And if you want them to invest in this, it's going to have to get more real than that. They want tools that they can make better decisions with. Feedlot performance, health, carcass merit. They want folks farther down the chain to help them a little bit, provide a better product to the other folks on the chain. I would argue that's what most producers want. So then they can make a better calf with wise decisions and then potentially make more money. So, to me, this is where the rub is. If we can add value in terms of knowledge to ADT, I'll tell you what, I don't think it's a hard sell at all. Even those producers who are like, even my brother-in-law, God love him, even he will say, you give me something, I'll consider it. Our friends in the feedlot sector, it is awesome to see some of them here today, because this has been a little bit of a challenge at times, getting that particular audience to want to play. So I tip my figurative hat to those folks. And when you hear the conversations that were going on up here, in particular, and again, the folks up north kind of got some things figured out for them, but in feedlot country in Texas and Kansas, that packers and feedlots are invested in that, amen. We can make processes and we can make plans going forward. Let me tell you what I do. International Genetic Solutions, what is IGS? Layman's terms, it's essentially the genetics arm. Oh, I'm about to expose myself. How many of you know anybody who works for a breed association? Let me go ahead and tell you something. They're all liars and charlatans. And I work for one. IGS is an outgrowth of the American Simmental Association, where we work collaboratively with American Gelbvieh, Red Angus, Limousin, associations in Canada, associations in Australia. We have members and associations that are cooperative, collaborative partners in IGS through every country in North America, all the way down in Central America to Panama, and a number of folks in Australia. Our job is to make data so appealing you can't help but pay us to do it. It's the largest beef genetic evaluation on the planet. You might say, well, that's nice, you can talk and your bald head's shining the light on us and it's making us hard for to watch you. This is our credibility. When you can put together an 18 million head database, get back with me. But we have a fair number of cattle that we can use to learn knowledge from. By the way, here's the interesting piece, and here's the interesting piece to the audience we're talking about. All the genetic predictions out of this piece are a multi-breed, composite, crossbred stuff. We can work with any basic breed type. That's who we are, and I bring that up because data acquisition is important to us. How do we do it? A phrase that has somehow, in the modern lexicon, become a negative. I would say there's absolutely nothing wrong with that word. I would say it's the foundational piece to capitalism. Those three words, I guess. Quid pro quo means something for something. Okay? We've turned it into a slightly more smarmy version of that. It means something for something. Tell me that you didn't already do a quid pro quo transaction sometime this morning. Bet you did. That's what we do. That's how we function. We try to they need to receive and perceive value of what we do. IGS is purely, plain and simple, a big data tech company. We take billions of data points, just like you're trying to do. And here's the challenge. We all have so much data. We love talking about the data. You know what most of this data is until, again, some of these efforts up here, kudos to them, because you're trying to take a whole bunch of data points that nobody can do a darn thing with. It's just noise. Flat confusing noise. And turning it into useful tools that add value. In our case, because we're a genetics firm, it's typically in the version of genetic tools. We would contend this. Voluntary data is always more desirable. Why? How many of you, I spoke about this as charlatans at a breed association. How many of you have ever reported data to a breed association in your lives? Okay. How many of you, when you were taking those birth weights, were really prone, because it was cold, to never let go of the steering wheel and just look out the window and go, 77 pounds. 77 pounds. You all, again, because of the nobility in the room, would never consider doing a thing like that, but some lesser mortals might. Voluntary data is always an advantage because the folks who are passionate about getting good tools out of the data are going to give you more credible information in. And I'll tell you what we found very specifically. Again, if you're not mired in this nonsense, you probably wouldn't have a reason. But large genetic firms, we talk about something called whole herd reporting or inventory-based reporting. What does that mean? That means for us to do our best job providing science, if you report your entire calf crop, we get a much better picture of the genetic merit, right? Makes sense. That's the long and the short of it. And some associations mandate that, and great, and some don't consider it all. Our approach is somewhere in the middle, and here's why. Briefly, a number of years ago, long before my affiliation with the group, we tried to mandate it. And you know what happened? When you started looking at the correlations of the data, they started to slip a little. Why? I'm just saying that some folks may have had a little less integrity in their data reporting. So what we did is we incentivized whole herd reporting. We made it so cheap you couldn't hardly get around it unless you really intentionally wanted to get around it, in which case you don't want to turn any data into us anyway, so it works out and we win. We get good data, you save money. Oh, I should tell you, by the way, that approach has been extraordinarily advantageous. Financially, we're blessed. The good Lord has been very, very kind. I'll put it as simple as this. We could work, and I mentioned this to somebody yesterday, we could work at a significant deficit for the next 10 years, and it wouldn't change our business model a lick. That's how much folks have found their way to this platform because they feel like they're getting value add. We get a number of folks who aren't even IGS breed types coming in because they want better data at a cheaper price. By the way, our non-IGS breed types, Tom, this might be something news to you, roughly year-over-year growth in that category of non-IGS seed stocks. That means folks of breed types that we don't directly service, 20% growth year-over-year. Commercial clients, and this is where we come back to the point here. Commercial clients want knowledge. Two biggest things they can take back to their ranch and make serious decisions with: health, genetics. And we're in a position where we can provide commercial clients genetic tools. That bottom line, year-over-year growth, 132%. 132%. Not going to bore you with cattle genetics. You probably don't care. But I want to show you what good data can do. All these lines don't mean a lot to you. But this is one particular breed type. I just pulled one breed type out of our IGS database. In this case, it's the Simmentals. And the long and the short of it, most of you understand these dynamics. The very top one is a dotted line. It's red. That's calving ease. Going up is a great thing. Correlates pretty highly to the solid red line going down. And if any of you knew Simmental genetics 20 years ago, you know what they were, right? And so if we damn well didn't do that, we'd be zoo animals by now. Okay? But instead, folks use data to make serious decisions. And I know, I've run the numbers. There is not a single breed type of cattle in this country that has that combination of genetic trends at present. Not one outside of that particular group. Why? Because when you put good data in and the appropriate selection pressure on certain things, you can increase calving ease, increase growth, increase marbling, and increase longevity all at the same time. Those things will make commercial folks money. You all have at your hands the ability to provide commercial folks that level of knowledge. Don't punt on that. I took the breed type off of this one. This is not an IGS breed type. But I want to show what happens if you use flawed data. Not going to tell you this is, so don't even ask. But it's another particular breed. And the blue line is a terminal metric. The orange line is a maternal metric. That's over the last 20 years. Same length of time you all have been having this conversation. Ish. What does that tell us? If we don't have good data and we select for the wrong thing, what just happened to that population? Where 20 years ago, those two lines were pretty close together, what have we done? We have diverged, which means we have clearly turned this particular population of cattle into totally terminal and marginally maternal. That's what happens if you either have challenging data or don't use your data well. This is, again, another breed type within IGS, and you can see how those trend lines tend to chase each other. So, my contention is something for something works. We need a feedback loop. And again, I encourage you all to not lose the potential to connect the dots here. Because why? We can do so much. We can begin to solve the traceability, but we can do it while making our commercial producers better. We can add them a competitive edge. We can make them better at their farm and their ranch, and we can answer some of the traceability pieces. And so don't sacrifice this in the effort to play it safe. I'm going to share with you a message a lot of beef producers would like me to share with you right now. Don't do that. Do not do that. There are a whole bunch of folks involved in this conversation who would really like to use this traceability platform as a ruse to get data that they can mine, that they can tell folks how to do their job. If you don't believe me, go back and listen to the videos from April. And when producers hear some of those things, they start to question. And so I would encourage you to avoid making traceability some disguise for sustainability efforts. Now, if folks want to get involved voluntarily in sustainability efforts, I think that's phenomenal. In fact, I would argue we can already provide you efficiency and longevity measures tomorrow. So if you want to get sustainability metrics through traceability, they're there. We can do it. Make sure they know up front what you're trying to do. Don't sneak this in the back door on them. There are a lot more collaborative efforts that could come. Now, they need tools. I'm between you and lunch, so I won't belabor all of these things. They need tools. Your program has the potential. You heard what they're talking about in Texas. You heard about the base level they're talking about in Kansas now, but potentially with more opportunities to come. These are frameworks to empower the beef producer. We talked about the concept of price differentiation, frankly, long before I could spell the word price differentiation. This gives an opportunity for that to happen, both from a traceability standpoint and a genetic and a health awareness standpoint. We need folks with leverage to play along. And here's the thing. When it comes to major purveyors and retailers, if you didn't know it, if we don't empower folks to do this, if you don't know some of these retail efforts are coming, some of you in the room do know, I know you know, but there are a lot of major firms who are just going to go around all of us. They're just going to go around all of us. And if you think you're immune to it, maybe you are. I'm not. And so I would encourage us to bring them to the table as well, because a lot of commercial producers think packers have leverage. Packers have only the leverage these folks give to them. We need terminal awareness. They will come to this system like no tomorrow if you can give them a value add. Let them make better cattle. They'll trade you traceability if you'll give them the ability to empower their own family and their own operation to make more money. With that said, whether mandatory or not, if we will look at that approach seriously and not with lip service, I would argue we can make traceability so much real, so much faster than many of us probably think at this point. But it only comes if we return the favor. If we continue to try to push it upon them, they will balk like crazy. So, little ad campaign we use from time to time, know or guess. Know or guess. With that, I will be quiet. I ran through that as quick as I could to get us back on track so you can go to lunch. And if you have questions, I'll take them. But more importantly, if you have things to throw at me, now would be the time.